Hey everyone, welcome to Professor Long's Lectures in Anatomy and Physiology. I'm Professor Bob Long. As you guys know, when the coronavirus shut down, blah, blah, blah. I know you're tired of hearing it, but these videos are intended for use by students who are in my Human Anatomy and Physiology class. Anyone else out there in YouTube land finds them helpful, great, but they're designed for the breadth and the depth of the topic and how I cover them for my students in my course. We're in a series of endocrine videos for Part 2A and P. This should be, I believe, our fourth endocrine video. First one did the definitions, overview of the endocrine system, and where are the receptors at the target cells. The second video did the 4 pathways that hormones can follow. The third video did the neuroendocrine reflex, or those hormones that go through the posterior pituitary. The hypothalamus would detect a stimulus, but the neurons would send their hormones, their axons into the posterior pituitary. The hormone goes directly to the target cells. Now this video is going to be focused on the complex endocrine reflexes. Complex endocrine reflexes always involve the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary. There's going to be some kind of stimulus. I don't know how well you can read this, but some stimulus is detected by a group of cells in the hypothalamus. They'll release a hormone that is abbreviated something RH, which means releasing hormone. That hormone will go through a special group of blood vessels, pop out at the anterior pituitary. It'll stimulate a second group of cells in the anterior pituitary to release another hormone, usually called a tropic hormone. And as we said before, this tropic hormone can follow one of 2 pathways. The tropic hormone will go through the bloodstream and it could bind to a third group of cells. In some instances, it'll bypass that and go straight to the target. This particular hormone we're going to do first. This group of cells will release another hormone into the bloodstream. That goes to our target cells and gives us the response. It's truly a complex endocrine reflex because there's multiple steps involved. There's 3 hormones involved in this one. If you're following along in my note set, we're on page 25. This is going to be the first hormone. I'm going to do several hormones of the complex endocrine pathway. I'll do as many as I can in this video until I get to about 30 minutes, and then I'll stop and do a new video. I got a timer going trying to keep it under 30 minutes now. So the first hormone we're going to do is called thyroid hormone. And as you know, that's my abbreviation for the word hormone. Thyroid hormone actually is also called Thyroxin. And Thyroxin can be abbreviated. One of the abbreviations we give it for this hormone is T3 and T4. It goes into, there are 2 different forms. I'm going to write some stuff over here. Don't write it in your note set where this is. I'm going to erase it. But what I want you to know is this. T3 stands for the word triiodothyronine. Tri meaning 3 iodine ions. Thyroid hormones have in them either 3 iodide ions, so we're talking about the atom iodine, and when it ionizes becomes iodide. So we're going to have, you need iodine to make this hormone. T3, triiodothyronine, has 3 iodide ions in it. It's got a cousin called T4, which stands for tetra. Tetra means 4, so it's called tetraiodothyronine. So triiodothyronine and tetraiodothyronine are T3 and T4. Both can be released into your bloodstream, and then we convert T4 to T3 as well. And then it becomes much more active. So this hormone goes by 3 names: thyroid hormone, thyroxin, or T3 and T4, triiodo and tetraiodothyronine. We need iodine in our diet to manufacture it, and even people who are allergic to things that are high in iodine, like shellfish and things, still need a little bit in their diet in order to make this hormone. By the way, when we have a lack of iodine, we can make the fluid. If you recall, when we studied in lab, the thyroid gland has all these small follicles called thyroid follicles. When we looked at the slide, and every one of these thyroid follicles is filled with a fluid. These would be the follicular cells, and the fluid in here would be called colloid. The colloid contains T3 and T4, and if we don't have enough iodine, we can secrete fluid into the follicles the colloid, but it won't be rich in T3 and T4. So when we secrete, we're not releasing the hormone. And actually, we don't even secrete the fluids if you don't have iodine in it. And the follicles will swell and swell and swell, and people used to get really large masses in their throat called a goiter. Your thyroid gland sits right about between your Adam's apple and what we call the mandibular notch of the manubrium. So right in here is where your thyroid gland is. And you can see people with swellings here called goiter. Goiter happens because we're not secreting the thyroid hormone due to a lack of iodine in the diet. Back in the, I think it was the 20s or 30s, before we had refrigeration, people who were landlocked that didn't have access to seafood didn't get enough iodine in their diet. So the government demanded that when we make sodium chloride, that a certain amount of that be sodium iodide, which is iodized salt. When you buy table salt at a grocery store, usually it's called iodized salt. They added a little bit of sodium iodide in there so that everybody got enough iodine in their diet to make the hormones and secrete it, which eliminated a lot of the goiter. Kind of an interesting side note. Also, I want to go back to something and set us up for the understanding of this hormone, okay? Inside of our cells, if I took a typical human cell with its nucleus, there are organelles, and they're not this large, they're way smaller than the nucleus, but I'm going to enlarge one, called mitochondria. And as you recall, our cells need oxygen plus glucose, a sugar. We need to run them through mitochondria, and we get out 36 molecules of ATP. There's so much of our physiology that is directed around energy production, it's ridiculous. Now, as we convert that into ATP, we spit out some carbon dioxide plus some water. Essentially, what we're doing is we're breaking bonds in glucose using oxygen, and we're converting the energy in those bonds into the energy of the bonds of ATP, and then we can break those bonds and release the energy for our cells to perform functions. It's all about energy. Now, we're converting energy in these bonds into energy in those bonds. There's a rule in physics that says energy cannot be created, nor can it be destroyed. It can only change from one form to another. And as we convert energy from one form to another, we never get 100% transfer. Some of that energy can dissipate in other forms. Like when you release the energy in a carbon source like wood or charcoal by lighting it with oxygen, some of the energy is given off as heat, but we don't get 100% of the heat off. Some of it also is released as light. So when we convert the energy in these bonds to these bonds, some of the energy does not get transferred here, and some of that energy is dissipated as heat, which gives us our body temperature, which is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Our core body temperature comes from the fact that even when we're not active, our body is burning enough energy to perform all the processes of life, even at rest. And as we're performing that, we're producing our body temperature. What happens if we start exercising or becoming physically exerted and our temperature goes up? We're producing more energy. If you get on the elliptical or you start working out and go for a run, your body is going to burn energy faster. We're going to generate heat faster than we can dissipate it, and your body temperature goes up. You get hot. So body temperature and energy production, what we call energy metabolism, are closely linked. How fast you metabolize sugar to make energy determines how much heat we can generate. If I increase metabolism, I increase body temperature. If I decrease metabolism and take a nap, my temperature goes down. So temperature and energy metabolism are indelibly linked. In order to metabolize energy, I have to burn glucose and I have to burn oxygen. If you go back to the introductory of the autonomic system where I drew the little choo-choo train, remember, if I'm going to burn energy to go faster, to get hotter, I'm going to shovel more oxygen and glucose into my cells. That means my liver has to release glycogen. My heart has to beat faster to pump the glucose to my cells, and I have to breathe faster. So anytime I increase energy metabolism, I increase breathing rate, I increase heart rate and blood pressure, I increase the release of glycogen or glucose from the glycogen in the liver, and I increase my body temperature. So they're all related, and we're going to see the side effects of thyroid hormone. Okay? So knowing that, let's look at thyroid hormone. What is the stimulus for the release of thyroid hormone? Well, the stimulus for the release of thyroid hormone is a low concentration of T3 and T4 in our blood. That's one stimulus. If you recall in chemistry, these brackets mean the concentration of whatever's inside the brackets. So this is decreased concentration of T3 and T4 in the blood, which means we have a decreased metabolism, we have decreased energy, and we have decreased body temperature. Now, I didn't write this out very well because I can't fit it all in here, but that would all be the stimulus for this hormone. And by the way, when we talk about a decrease in energy, there's a term used in medicine called lethargy. When someone becomes lethargic, to have general lethargy or to be lethargic means you don't have energy. If anyone has ever been diagnosed with anemia, and you feel that tiredness, you just don't have the energy to do anything, they call that physical tiredness lethargy or being lethargic. So we could say, instead of decrease of energy, we could say someone's lethargic. When all of those happen, we detect that in our hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is measuring body temperature. It can monitor the concentrations of these substances. And through energy metabolism, we're producing a lot more carbon dioxide. So our hypothalamus is measuring all this, and it will release a hormone called TRH. Again, I'm going to erase this because I'm out of room, but TRH stands for thyroid releasing hormone. You should know the abbreviation, you should know the name. Thyroid releasing hormone, I'm going to erase that. I need this part of the board. Again, normally I do this on a really large board. So TRH is what would be released at the hypothalamus. TRH will target the cells of the anterior pituitary, and they're going to release a tropic hormone called TSH. TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. TSH is going to go and target the thyroid follicles. So the endocrine organ in this sense here is going to be my thyroid follicle, the follicular cells. And the follicular cells have receptors for TSH, and TSH will cause the thyroid follicles to release or secrete T3 and T4, or thyroxin, thyroid hormone. Now, if you think about it, where in the body do we produce energy? What cells need energy production? The answer should be all of them. All of your cells need to produce energy. So most cells of the body end up being targets for thyroid hormone. I mean, I can't think of a cell that maybe skin cells, but other than that, a lot of our cells are producing energy. But the ones that are mainly involved are going to be these targets, okay? So I'm going to list just a few. One of this would be the liver. Another would be muscle, heart, lungs, respiratory system, okay? The response is going to be to increase energy metabolism. Okay? Which will also result in increased temperature. So we've essentially raised T3 and T4 in our blood, we've increased our metabolism and our energy levels, and we've increased our body temperature. We've basically taken our stimulus and eliminated it. This is a negative feedback loop. Now the mechanism is it will increase heart rate and blood pressure, so that we are pumping more blood and faster, or we're pumping blood faster and under higher pressure to our tissues. It will increase oxygen consumption, and it will increase glucose consumption. It will increase breathing rate. Oops, it's hard to write at the bottom of the board. These are all sort of side effects of thyroid hormone. If we're going to increase energy metabolism, then my liver has to release glucose. So I should put the liver down here, and for the liver I should say breakdown of glycogen to release glucose. So at the liver, we'll break down glycogen to release glucose. We'll increase our breathing rate for more oxygen. We increase our heart rate and blood pressure to pump all that glucose and oxygen like that fireman in the little engine, and then that will increase our energy metabolism, which will raise body temperature. So here's what you need to know about thyroid hormones. The stimulus, low concentration of T3 and T4. It's almost like your air conditioner. If you set the temperature on your heater to be a certain temperature and it drops too low, then the heater kicks on, and as the temperature rises, it shuts itself off. So the concentration of T3 and T4 is monitoring itself, so to speak, at the hypothalamus. When T3 and T4 get low, we have low metabolism, low energy, and low body temperature. The hypothalamus releases thyroid-releasing hormone. That targets the anterior pituitary, causes it to release thyroid-stimulating hormone. Thyroid-stimulating hormone targets the follicular cells in the thyroid follicles and causes them to release thyroid hormone from the thyroid follicles. So here I would have T3 and T4 being released, and that T3 and T4 is going to target most of the cells of the body and increase energy metabolism and body temperature. And we could talk about at the liver, we release glycogen to free up the glucose. And muscle, it will increase energy metabolism so our muscles can function. It will increase heart rate, it will increase our breathing rate so that we can have all of this oxygen consumption and glucose taking more and shoveling it into our muscles and our cells so we can increase body temperature, increase energy metabolism. Okay. This is the crux of what you need to know: the stimulus, the pathway, which hormones are released where, the target, and the response. The mechanism you should also understand. Now that's going to lead us to some other interesting information. So I'm going to erase some of this. Hopefully you have it all down. Also, I didn't write everything down. I do want you to read the textbook and read the chapter, but I tried to give you most of what you need to know here. Look, one last thing I want to point out about thyroid hormone, okay? There is a term for people who don't produce enough thyroid hormone called hypothyroidism, okay? In hypothyroidism, we have decreased T3 and T4 release at the thyroid. Actually, there's two different ways that we can have hypothyroidism. If I don't release thyroid releasing hormone, so for people who are experiencing lethargy and exhaustion and coldness all the time, they can go to their doctor, and the doctor will either diagnose you usually with anemia and or hypothyroidism. In hypothyroidism, you have low concentrations of T3 and T4. That can result from one of several things. They run what's called a thyroid panel. In the thyroid panel, they measure TRH concentration. If your hypothalamus is not releasing TRH, everything else will be low. If this is normal, but this is low, then the anterior pituitary is not either manufacturing or secreting thyroid-stimulating hormone, so this will be low. In some instances, these are normal, but T3 and T4 are low. In any of those conditions, if these are low, this is going to be low, you're going to have hypothyroidism, hypo meaning below or less than. And then you're going to experience these symptoms. People who have hypothyroidism have low metabolism, therefore low energy, and they're cold a lot of the time. If we're not burning the food that we consume, then our body stores it. So in hypothyroidism, also people can have rapid weight gain in a short period of time. The exact opposite of hypothyroidism is a disorder called hyperthyroidism or hyperactive thyroid. Some people get thyroid storms where you release massive amounts of T3 and T4. Well, guess what the side effects of that are going to be? Someone who has a lot of energy, is very jittery all the time, rapid heart rate, they breathe, they sweat all the time, and they're just burning up, and they have rapid weight loss. So for people who have hypothyroidism, they experience this and weight gain. Hyperthyroidism means you have too much energy, too much energy consumption, you're eating all the time, you can't gain weight, you're always jittery and awake, trouble sleeping, hyperactivity, lots of things go on with it, but you get the idea. All right? So now, that's thyroid hormone, that's hyper and hypothyroidism. You should know all of that. All right? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take the same paradigm and we're going to plug another hormone into it. We just have to erase some of these terms and erase what the endocrine organ would be. So now you should be able to take this drawing or this list at the top right, thyroid hormone, and work your way. Stimulus, what's released at the hypothalamus, what's released at the anterior pituitary, what's released at the thyroid follicles, where the targets are, what the response is, and for this hormone we're going to have a mechanism. Okay, so all of that's page 25. Now we're supposed to do page 26 next, but page 26 is going to be a little bit more involved, and since I only have 10 minutes, I'm going to do some of the hormones on page 27. So I'm actually, if you're in my class, skip over to page 27 of the note set, and we'll go back to page 26 in another video, and there's a reason for that. So the next hormone I want to do is called prolactin. And really the name of this hormone tells you what it does. Lactose, a sugar, is one of the sugars in breast milk. Production of lactin, prolactin, means production of breast milk. And this hormone is often abbreviated as PRL for prolactin. The stimulus for this hormone is pregnancy. There's a hormone released from what eventually it's going to become the placenta, which is called the chorion in the uterus, called human placental lactogen. And human placental lactogen will stimulate the hypothalamus. And so during pregnancy, or a hormone called human, that's the little h, placental, from the placenta, lactogen, to generate lactose, or breast milk. Human placental lactogen, if you injected that into somebody's IV, they would start to release prolactin. Now the hypothalamus is going to release a hormone that in some books is called PRF. The PRF stands for prolactin releasing factor. When we use the term factor, it means they haven't completely elucidated the entire amino acid sequence. They figured it out now, so some books call it PRH. So I'm going to put PRF in parentheses. Prolactin releasing factor or prolactin releasing hormone. That would be this hormone here, PRH. So the hypothalamus will release PRH, prolactin releasing hormone. That's going to go to the anterior pituitary, and the anterior pituitary is going to release prolactin. Now in this situation, we're going to completely skip the additional endocrine organ. We're going to bypass this step, and prolactin would go all the way straight to the target cells. The target is going to be the mammary glands, also called the lactiferous glands. And the response is going to be increase milk production. So prolactin does milk production. Remember, oxytocin does milk letdown after it's been produced when the baby's trying to get it out of the breast. So if you think about it, the female breast, the glands are very high up here. They're going to produce the milk, but the baby can't get to it. So when the baby suckles, oxytocin will cause the milk to be let down. So prolactin causes milk production, oxytocin causes milk letdown. We've already covered oxytocin. That's it for prolactin, really. You need to know that the stimulus is pregnancy or human placental lactogen. And in response to that, the hypothalamus releases prolactin-releasing hormone or prolactin-releasing factor. That will target the anterior pituitary and cause the anterior pituitary to release prolactin. Prolactin will bind to cells of the mammary glands and cause milk production. Okay, that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Don't worry about the mechanism for that hormone. All right? Now, I'm going to get another hormone squeezed into this video, which is why I skipped two of the others on the previous page. Also on page 27 is growth hormone. GH stands for growth hormone. Okay, and remember the H and an R combined is my abbreviation for hormone. The stimulus is normal development. A second stimulus could be a low concentration of growth hormone. When we're growing from, beginning in the womb until we stop our actual growing, but we still release some of this hormone. During normal development, you should have a certain amount of growth hormone available. And growth hormone, just like other hormones, when they get low, it will kick itself on and growth hormone levels will go up. When it rises, it turns itself off. So the hypothalamus is monitoring concentrations of growth hormone. If it gets too low, then the hypothalamus will start to release a hormone called GHRH, which stands for growth hormone releasing hormone. That would be here, GHRH. Growth hormone releasing hormone will target the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary will release growth hormone. Growth hormone is going to target most cells of the body, really all of them. Your skin grows, your brain grows, your bones grow, your liver, your kidneys, everything in the body grows. Now, one of the targets that we really focus on when we talk about this would be muscle and connective tissue, ligaments, tendons, cartilage, and bone, because we see our growth, but also our skin, almost every cell of the body. But we really can focus on some muscle and connective tissue. The response is going to be increased growth or healing, which we also call tissue regeneration. So sometimes athletes get busted taking a compound called HGH. Always the little h means human. So some people are taking human growth hormone, and human growth hormone can be used by athletes to increase muscle mass and growth and development. But it can also increase our healing rate. So some athletes, when they're injured, will take growth hormone injections so that they heal faster and get back on the field. They're paying them millions of dollars, some of them, so they want them to grow faster. One of the mechanisms is it can increase protein synthesis, it can increase mitosis. So in many of our tissues, it will increase protein synthesis. All those proteins in bone and muscle so that they grow. It can increase mitosis or cell division, okay? So we can repair tissues or grow tissues. Now, some people call human growth hormone the fountain of youth, because as we start to grow, growth hormone goes up and up and up, and it levels off. But as we start to get older, until our older years, growth hormone starts to decrease. And we start to wear out. Our body doesn't repair damage. We get a little bit of weight gain, a lack of energy. It has a lot of side effects. So some people take human growth hormone as they get older, or they call what's called a secretagogue, which causes us to release growth hormone at the pituitary. And they feel younger, they feel more youthful, more energetic, maintain muscle mass and body tissue and bone mass over time. One of the problems is, if you're susceptible to a cancer, now you're going to stimulate cells that are already dividing too much, cancer cells, and you're going to stimulate them. So some cancers are fed by growth hormone. So anytime we talk about some kind of hormone replacement therapy, like replacing growth hormone or other hormones, we need to know what the side effects are, because if you have prostate cancer or any other kind of cancer as a male, or if you have uterine and breast cancer, do you really want to be feeding the cells something that's going to make them divide faster? So in healthcare, we always kind of balance out the risk and reward ratio. If the reward far outweighs the risk in restoring health, you do it. If they're close, and if they're out of balance where the risk is higher than the reward, then you don't do that modality of treatment. All right, so that's growth hormone. That's what you need to know about growth hormone, okay? I think I have enough time to do melanocyte stimulating hormone, or MSH, because it's also rather simple, okay? We just keep plugging these hormones into this picture, into this paradigm. So there's a hormone called MSH, which stands for melanocyte stimulating hormone. Remember, melanocytes are the cells in our skin that produce pigmentation. I have them in spots called freckles. Some people have a uniform distribution. We all have roughly the same number of melanocytes. What makes our skin pigmentation different from one person to another is how much melanin you're producing, which is the browns in your skin. If you're African American or people who have darker skin, they have a lot more melanin production from the melanocytes. For people who are almost transparent, like me, I'm so white I reflect light, then I don't produce a lot of melanin. Now, melanocyte stimulating hormone, the stimulus for that can be several-fold. It can be increased concentration of UV light or increased UV light exposure, ultraviolet light. And in females, pregnancy, for some reason, we have increased melanocyte stimulating hormone. The hypothalamus releases nothing. This hormone is released from an area very close to the center of the pituitary called the median eminence. So we say the anterior pituitary, but really there's a structure called the median eminence of the pituitary releases MSH. There has never been a releasing hormone discovered for this. And so MSH will target melanocytes in the epidermis of our skin. And the result is going to be increased skin pigmentation. Or you could say increased melanin production. The more melanin you produce, the tanner or darker your skin is. And if you produce it, lots of it uniformly, then you have the very beautiful dark skin, the olives and the darker skins. And then there's people like me that don't produce very much, except for in small pockets, all right? So now, I think that's everything I want you to know about melanocyte stimulating hormone. So we've done a bunch of hormones today. We finished page 25 and page 27. Thanks for watching. I hope you had as much fun as I did. I'll see you on the flip side in the next video.